behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, we're very happy of creating this relationship that we have with Babson and all the great things it's going to do for our local economy and local entrepreneurs, the thought and action leaders of entrepreneurship for the past 20 some years. You know, it really being able to provide these webinars to our local entrepreneurs and business people is really going to help us. So on behalf of the Chamber, we want to say thank you. And with regards for those of you who are not aware and are not members of the Chamber of Commerce yet, there are some fantastic programs that you can actually buy at a discount if you are a member of the Chamber of Commerce. And that includes everything from part-time MBAs to doing open enrollments. You know, it's a joke I tell to Rachel and Liz all along. I wish we had this when I did my MBA. I would have saved myself a few pretty pennies. But once again, if you're not a member of the Chamber, I would highly recommend you guys to join. And if you are considering doing a master's in business administration, Babson is the place to be. And without further ado, I want to thank you all for being here with us. And I'll pass it over to Jay. Once again, Jay, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Oh, Cameron, I think Rachel wants to say something before I proceed. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Thanks. That's all right. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for being here today. I'm Rachel Crane, and I'm work within the Executive Education Division at Babson, and I've been working very closely with the Chamber board members, kind of bringing this collaboration to life. So it's been an exciting couple months here. And I just wanted to make sure you all, I guess, saw me and knew that you could reach out to me if you had any questions about Babson, about executive education programs, and as well as the discounts and benefits that are available to you as a member of the Chamber. So my email and contact information will be shared as well. So without any additional delay, I'm fortunate to be able to introduce Babson Professor, Dr. Jay Rao. And you'll quickly, if you haven't already probably heard this so far in the beginning here, Jay is very passionate about teaching and working with organizations and students around areas of innovation, corporate entrepreneurship, and driving innovation around the customer experience. So Jay, we're all very much looking forward to hearing what thought-provoking things you have to say. And so I'll pass it now to you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. Firstly, again, thank you, Cameron, for arranging this and for the wonderful relationship that you have built with Babson. Much appreciated. Porque aquí mucha gente no habla en español, yo continúo en inglés. ¿Está bien?
Muy bien, perfecto.
I'm joking. But there ends my Spanish, by the way. So, can you all see my slides? Okay. I want this to be interactive. Please stop me anytime. Lift your hand, unmute yourself, ask questions, go to the chat, type away. Ignore the small font, okay? After the age of 55, when you have gray hair, at times I forget what I need to say. So many of the small font is for myself. So don't worry about it. I'll highlight it. You'll get all the slides anyway. Yep. Okay. Wonderful. So again, crisis fuels creativity and innovation. And I think many of you are experts in this space of crises. And I don't have to tell you, all the things that you have gone through. And I'm so happy that many of you have come out very successfully after the last big hurricane. And so, but crisis will keep coming. And if you look at some of the companies that have gone through crises, Boeing lost 90% of its revenues after World War II. And at the same time, they embarked on the biggest project ever in its history. And that was the 707 program. And that started the jet engine era of flying. They're going through some challenges now, but they will rebound. Your neighbors, when the Soviet Union, something called the USSR, fell down, they lost huge amounts of exports and all their credit. And at that time, they had to sacrifice their values. They opened up their beaches for development. They opened up their hospitals as well for medical tourism. And so in very critical times, you may have to compromise your values. At a smaller scale, this is a hospital in Bangkok. During the Asian economic crisis, they had actually built up by taking a huge amount of loans and completely with US kind of certification. And when the crisis hit, they lost 90% of their customers. So again, they kind of opened up for medical tourism. And today, this is ground zero for medical tourism globally. They are the largest medical tourism company in the world. Smaller scale, much smaller scale. So if you look at, this is a restaurant, 3 restaurants in Medellin, Colombia, and 100% of their customers were gone in this COVID-19. What did Carmen do? Immediately, she switched over her entire menu. Instead of having trendy fusion cuisine, she switched to comfort food. Bandeja paisa, arroz, chicharrón, frijoles, pizza. And overnight, there were 2-3 hour waits for her to deliver food. So how can we in crises get through these things? So I've been studying crises for a long time. And this is even before the pandemic. I do a retail program at Babson along with Central American University, and we talk about how retail is dying, physical retail is dying in the United States even before the pandemic, and we've seen that this is huge collapse in this space. And after the pandemic, it's only gotten worse. It hasn't gotten any better, and so we are seeing huge amounts of bankruptcies. And yet, even during the worst times, you're seeing that there are opportunities. And I love this expression. In the word crisis comes from a Greek word called krisis. And it means it's a point of decision making. And in Mandarin, this expression is called weiji. Weiji means crisis in Mandarin, but it's also the same word for opportunity. So every crisis is this opportunity, and what we see is that there is innovation and creativity that is flourishing all around us globally. In unprecedented levels of innovation is happening. So whether you look at Dyson, which is a very famous inventor, whether you look at NASA, who's jumping in and trying to do things in the pandemic, or if it's Google and Apple teaming up. But these are companies, they're not surprising. They are always innovating. But what is always surprising for me is when companies who are really not known for innovation start to innovate. For many, many years, I worked with pharmaceutical industry. And for a decade, they kept trying to kill vaccines. The entire pharma industry did not want to do any vaccines. They were abandoning it. And they were down to 4 vaccine manufacturers globally because there's no money in vaccines. And yet, after COVID-19, everybody is jumping in. Wells Fargo, who made a name out of screwing people, okay, paid billions of dollars for fraud. They are saying, hey, we are going to be innovating. Ford and GE and General Motors are saying we are innovating. If you look at GM and Ford, they're some of the biggest gorillas globally in car and truck sales. But when it comes to innovation and electric cars, they are nowhere to be found in the top 25. They're completely AWOL. They're missing in action. It's these small companies, BYD and Tesla, who are at the top. And yet, this is a CEO at General Motors who killed the electric car when he was in GM. And he has gone and started an electric car business. Okay. And as recently as March 2020, this is at the beginning of the pandemic, GM and Ford had no plans, or they were actually revving up old businesses. And 1 year later, in the Super Bowl, GM is going and selling that we are going to be invading Norway with electric cars. This is hypocrisy at its best. Okay, so what does crisis do? What do crises do for companies and innovation? And how is it that such a shift can happen so quickly? So COVID-19 has given us the shock therapy, right? And how do we kind of work so quickly? You look at a hospital in Cincinnati. They were doing 2,000 televisits in all of 2019, but post-COVID, they're doing 5,000 per week. In Dubai, this is a huge chain that they took 1,000 theater people and retrained them within 2 days for a different job. Best Buy was doing some pilot testing, but soon after the pandemic, within 2 days, they were able to kind of change on a dime. And so we see this all over the place. It's not just large companies, medium companies, or small companies. It's governments are able to kind of change and react in crises. Now, here's the good news. This is new businesses that are being started. For the longest time, it was flat. And post-pandemic, there's a huge surge in the new businesses that are being formed in the United States. And in fact, entrepreneurship was on the decline for years. And we were concerned as the mecca of entrepreneurship at Babson, we were very concerned about this, okay? And yet we are seeing that there's a huge uptick in business creation. And in fact, in Puerto Rico as well. So entrepreneurs in Puerto Rico are solving problems after Hurricane Maria. 2 years after Hurricane Maria ravaged Puerto Rico, startups are thriving amid plans to fix problems because of the storm. And I'm going to come back to this later, okay? So I want to talk about how we become creative, not just during good time or during bad times, but even during good times. How can we humans become more innovative, more creative, more entrepreneurial? And so let's go and look at some of the best people. How do they become creative? Okay. The good news is that we all are creative. It's all inside of us. It's just that we have to kind of get it out into the open. Okay. There are many ways to innovate. The purpose of innovation is to change the game in the marketplace. Okay. And one of the most common forms of innovation is something called application innovation. This application innovation is the most common and the most prevalent type of innovation that happens globally, okay? And then humanity. So let's go deep into that and see what is that form of innovation. Specifically, it's linked with creativity. Okay? So also innovation is very democratic. Why do I say it's democratic? Large company, small company like Palm, small company called Techno, Xiaomi started incredibly small. BlackBerry started very small. So large companies, small companies, anybody can innovate and change the game. So what is this application innovation? Application innovation is taking something that worked in one industry and moving it to a different industry. Okay? We always had cell phones, lithium-ion cell phones here in cell phones, but then now it's taking those lithium-ion batteries and putting it in the car. That's application innovation. I don't know if you've heard of a company called De Uno or Aldi. Do you have Aldi in Puerto Rico? No? Great opportunity. You need to get Aldi in Puerto Rico. It's De Uno is an exact copy of Aldi, but in Colombia. Okay, and they're growing like crazy. Okay, and Aldi is now the fastest growing grocery retailer in the United States. Okay. And it's an exact replica of a German model. So Southwest Airlines, one of our favorite US airlines, they were born in a crisis. And in fact, there was a lawsuit because at that time it was actually a regulated market. And immediately Eastern Airlines filed a lawsuit saying that they can't fly in Texas. But while the lawsuit was going on, they didn't want to waste time. So what did Southwest do? They went to a company called Pacific Southwest Airlines, and they bought their training manuals, they bought their operating manuals, and started working. And when the lawsuit was settled, they just dropped the word P called Pacific, and they renamed themselves Southwest Airlines. So the founder of Southwest said, "We don't mind being copycats." Southwest Airlines copied PSA so completely that you could almost call us a photocopy. Okay. 4 years later, 1981 was the oil embargo, and Southwest Airlines was going bankrupt because of fuel prices. They had 4 planes. And the finance people said, you know what, in order to survive, you have to sell one of the planes. But they didn't want to decrease the number of passengers being carried every day. So how can you carry the same number of passengers with one less plane? So the decision was made that they have to make sure that they spend very little time at the airport. So they come to the airport, they get the people off, get the baggage out, fuel the plane, they clean the plane, put the people back in, out. They were doing it in 15, 20 minutes. So if you want to learn how to do this, who will you learn this from? Who do you go to learn how to really turn around incredibly quickly at the airport? Who would you go to learn this, how to do this?
I would think Formula One pit stop.
Absolutely. That's exactly what they did. Okay. And in fact, today, many hospitals in the emergency rooms, they are copying the Formula One pit stop methodology. Okay. CSA, you have a comment here. What is the company that modeled Germany in Colombia? Yes, it is D1. And there are also other copycats in Colombia. One is Justo y Bueno, and the other one is ARA. Okay, and if Puerto Rico doesn't have it, you have to get it. Okay, it's called deep discounting. Okay, tiendas de uno, sí. Okay, Henry Ford. Do you think he woke up one day and in the bathtub he got the idea, jumped out of the bathtub and ran to the city center saying, "Yeah, Eureka, I got it"? Where do you think he got the idea from? Take a guess, come on. He was visiting a slaughterhouse. And he said, "Oh my God, I could do this for the cars instead of having animals on the assembly line." Google PageRank was actually copied from the citation index of academics. The Magic Band of Disney was copied from Nike Fuel Band and Treon Z. Genius Bar was copied from a concierge desk, 5-star concierge desk. What do you think? Oh,
Romeo and Juliet?
Of course. It was copied. Okay, the young people think it's Titanic, okay? So, but slightly older people think it's Romeo and Juliet. What were his other famous tragedies? It was copied. Macbeth was copied. King Lear copied. By the way, Richard II was a real story, so he didn't have to copy anything, okay? Merchant of Venice was copied. Bob Dylan, his first 25 songs, none of them were original. So if you want a Nobel Prize, what do? When he created the first 10 movies, none of them were original. When he created Disney World, he went to Tivoli Gardens, took out a sheet of paper and copied the layout of Tivoli Gardens, brought back to Anaheim in California and laid it out. Picasso, he was notorious in the early days when he was in Paris. Many other artists were very afraid to bring him into their studios because he would copy everything. Which country?
China.
Of course. I do a lot of work in India. When I show this in India, what do you think the people say? Oh, this is us. When I go to Brazil, they say, oh, of course, this is us. Right? This was USA. Okay. Charles Dickens, the famous English poet, he comes to Boston in 1842. And then he's very angry. He's very upset because on the streets of Boston, all his books are being sold without any copyrights. At that time, this was the textile capital of the New World, the New England area. He visits a couple of mills, and again, all the machinery, all of it stolen from England. So he goes back to England, he writes an article in the newspaper, I'll never set foot in the country of thieves again. So this was Japan after World War II. This was Korea and Taiwan in the 1980s. And this was Singapore in the 1980s and Dubai in the 1990s. Today, Facebook is copying Amazon. Amazon is copying Alibaba. Facebook is copying TikTok. And Steve Jobs has always said, I've been shamelessly copying all my life. So, what am I trying to say? Originality is very important. Patents are very important. You have to celebrate uniqueness, but don't die searching for uniqueness. Only academics care for unique customer value proposition. Only consultants care for unique customer value proposition. Okay? Entrepreneurs don't care for uniqueness. Entrepreneurs care for opportunity. Is there a gap in the market? Okay? And can I take it? I'm not saying patents are not important. Many industries will not function or they won't get investment if there are no patents, especially medical devices and pharmaceuticals. Okay? But in most other industries, you have the luxury to actually copy. So again, it's not where you copy from, it's where you take it to. So when the pandemic started, I started tracking all the things that were going on immediately. What are the different ways we were solving problems? So as early as February 2020, this is in China. Small company did not want to lay off any of their employees. So a bunch of restaurants got together and said, why don't we lend our employees to e-retailers? Because e-commerce retailers were hiring at that time. So how can we then share our employees rather than laying them off? Immediately, the larger e-commerce companies also started doing the same thing. So immediately they copied what these smaller companies were doing and actually creating. Instead of firing people, they were actually sharing people. And at that time, I was still working with some Indian companies. And then when I showed them this example, they said, oh my God, we are also trying to do something very similar in here, in India. Let's go back 100 years to Spanish flu. If you compare two cities, Philadelphia and St. Louis, Philadelphia had a huge number of deaths, whereas St. Louis had a much smaller death rate. And how did that happen? In fact, what happened in Philadelphia was that the health director did not listen to any of the warnings. He ignored all the data completely, and he ignored all the experts. And he threw a party, a mega parade, and that really blew up. But when you go to what happened in St. Louis was exactly the opposite. So Max Starkloff was the health commissioner, and he wanted to make sure that the pandemic did not come into his city, or at least keep the deaths as low as possible. So basically, he created an advisory body, a very diverse group of people, and actually enrolled the citizens, got the citizen cooperation to kind of help to keep the pandemic out, and came up with lots of cooperation with the community. And how did he think about all this? Did he magically come up with this idea? No, he did not. His father was a U.S. Army surgeon, and he was sent to Bremen in Germany as the U.S. consul. And when his father, Hugo Starkloff, landed in Germany, there was a mega pandemic going on in Germany. There was a cholera pandemic. And so at that time, Hugo Starkloff made a decision that that pandemic would not reach the United States. He made sure that nobody got onto the ships going to the US at that time. And so Max Starkloff had seen his father do this when he was a young man. And so he copied all these things from his father. So for us, how do we become creative? Copying is the starting point. The more we copy, the more creative we get. The faster we copy, the more creative we get. So if you want to get started and doing things quickly, anybody been to DFA? Now it's called CDMX, Ciudad de Mexico. Yeah. Have you been to Casa Azul? You know Casa Azul? Casa Azul is the house of Frida Kahlo. Okay. Frida Kahlo, the parents knew that she was very talented in the young age, okay, but she never had any teacher. She didn't have formal training. So at the age of 13, they bring in a formal teacher. And the teacher looks at all the work she has done and said, wow, you have really good talent. You're very creative. And then he says, stop being original. Create, copy the masters, and you will become even more creative. So for us, how do we all become creative? In fact, exact copying won't work. If you take De Uno and try to put it in Puerto Rico, it may not work immediately, which means you will have to be, you'll be forced to be creative at that moment. So that's exactly what your government did. Soon after Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico was struggling, right? So the government was looking for solutions, and it turned to Chile. And the goal was to emulate its successful accelerator, the startup Chile. And so that is what has been pushing stuff inside Puerto Rico today. And there is research. The research is very good. This is pretty scientific research to understand how we humans actually become creative. It's called innovators' DNA. Serial entrepreneurs, scientists who have a lot of patents, and people who keep creating new businesses all the time. They're very good in what's called as associative thinking. This associative thinking is connecting the dots. Okay. Well, consultants and academics need to have fancy words. What is this connecting the dots? At Babson, we don't use fancy terms and words. We just copy, we just say copy and steal legally. That's all we say. Okay, whether it is application innovation, associative thinking, positive deviance, benchmark, it doesn't matter. Okay, so please do that, and you can overcome almost anything. So if you look at COVID innovations, this is all in the last 1 year. So there's a website where they're collecting all the innovations that are happening globally. And in fact, you can go to the website and you can see in which industry, what innovations are happening globally. And you can pick and choose what is it that you want to copy in Puerto Rico. So I'm going to stop here. Questions, comments, discussion. I'm going to throw it open and then finally turn it to Rachel to say a few words in the end. Sorry, I went a little fast on this because I wanted to make sure we got time to discuss Q&A.
Please feel free to unmute and ask any questions or post to chat.
Post it in the chat, yeah.
So if someone is thinking about doing a startup, Jay, and let's say they're looking to copy or to start off as a foundation to copy, and what would you recommend to them to use as arguments against something like, for example, your idea is an original, or does the same customer base actually apply, or is that industry not necessarily in growth? So just walk us through what would be some of the counter arguments for that.
Yeah. So the word unique customer value proposition is something that is drilled into everybody's head, especially if you go to a business school. And investors are always saying, what is your unique customer value proposition? And consultants are always pushing you on unique customer value proposition. Okay? You have to be very careful with that. Okay? I'm not saying unique customer value proposition is not important. It is very important. Okay? If you find that uniqueness, more power to you. If you find that model of IKEA, if you find that Trader Joe's model which is unique, more power to you. Go for it, take advantage of it. Okay? But don't die searching for uniqueness. I repeat, taking an action is more important than trying to search for uniqueness on paper, on a PowerPoint. Entrepreneurs don't care for uniqueness. I'll give you an example that is the most simplest example I can think of. Those of you who are in the food business, you probably know this. You know these junk pizza places that are around in every town? You know, where you can go buy a slice of pizza, right? So there is a rule of thumb which says, if you have 10,000 people in a town, usually you can have 2 or 3 junk pizza places. Okay. So in our neighboring town called Dover, an entrepreneur finds out that there's only one of those junk pizza places and they have 10,000 people. So what does he do? He goes and puts another junk pizza place and it survives. And then he realizes, oh, Sherburne also has only one junk pizza place. So it can accommodate one more. So over the next 10 years, he found 20 such towns around Boston, which had only fewer than 2 or 3 junk pizza places. Of course, 15 years later, this person is a superstar because now you're franchising and now you're writing books. So please don't get caught in this academic consulting garbage that gets taught about unique customer value proposition. Go and check out a place called Pizza Patron. Pizza Patron was started by having a pizza place only in Latin communities in the United States. Okay. Today he has 100 locations. Okay, there is chicharron pizza, there is frijoles pizza, okay, but it's still pizza, junk pizza. Is that clear? Okay.
Crystal.
Think about opportunity. Think about a gap. Don't think about uniqueness.
Fantastic.
Be very careful when you're listening to pure academics who have never worked a day in their lives. Is that clear? Okay.
Hi, this is Jose Gonzalez.
Hola, Jose.
Hola. The presentation has been really good. I mean, it's amazing how well you can picture one business from a really tough situation coming into the really positive one, and that's admiring. I think my question or point is just how you go about that when everything around you is in crisis, which is the current situation, and that's why we're listening to you. And you have an idea, which, as you said, is unique or not, but taking the risk when everything around you is failing. I mean, it's like especially hard during this time to be an entrepreneur. But again, if you are successful, I guess it's especially productive. But how do you go about that mindset? You know, given the current situation.
This is the most common question I get globally. I have been going to Medellin, Colombia, for the last 25 years. How many of you have seen Narcos? If you have
I
seen
have.
Narcos, if you have seen Narcos, you know Medellin 25 years ago. Okay? It was one of the most difficult places on earth, with the maximum number of murders. There was zero hope. Okay? Today, it's one of the most innovative cities. And the city changed barrio by barrio. Barrio by barrio. Okay? I work with a lot of companies, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and you go there, there is no hope. You feel that there is absolutely no hope. But here is the good news. Even in the worst situations, you will find bright spots. I repeat, even in the worst situations, you will find bright spots. Your job is to go find the bright spots. I'll give another example. We have a lot of Venezuelan students. We have a lot of Venezuelan businesses for a long time. And today, I ask every Venezuelan one question. Give me the best bright spot company in Venezuela, and everybody gives one answer. Do you know what that is? Which company it is? It's a company called Polar. Okay? So there will always be bright spots even in the most difficult situations. So focus on the bright spots. Don't focus on the negativity. See what is working. We humans are amazingly creative. Okay? And so that's the first step I would take. So go copy things from really tough situations, how they have overcome those tough situations, and you can do it. Let me take a few questions from the chat, okay? Unmet needs. Margie, of course, if you find those unmet needs, that will get to your uniqueness. Is that clear? Okay. But don't create artificial constraints trying to find that uniqueness. Is that all right? If you find unmet needs, even better. And the beauty is always go and ask the customers and they'll tell you, because Jeff Bezos has a wonderful saying. The beauty of all customers is that there's always something they're complaining about. There's always something that you can improve. So let me take a couple of more. Okay. Are there any legal restrictions when trying to copy a business model? Absolutely, there are. Okay. Here's the good news. Most things are not patented in life. That's the good news. That's why I say copy and steal legally. Is that clear? When you're in crisis, it's not worth spending much on legal issues. Okay. And the good news is that there are lots and lots of things which are not protected by copyrights and patents. Okay. And that is where you can be very smart about it. And use the lawyers. They can help you in this crisis. Is that all right? To give you ideas as to what can be done legally. Okay. Absolutely, you should use their advice. Okay. Yours. Okay. Then Luis Canal said, "Action is the word. Can you talk about ETN action?" Yes. When there is uncertainty, there is risk and there is uncertainty. Okay. Risk is spreadsheet-based decision making. Risk is about the past. I have data from iPhone 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that clear? And you don't have to be a genius to tell me there will be iPhone 11. Everybody can tell you that. That's risk management. Uncertainties, I don't have data. Okay? So when I have data, I analyze and act. When I don't have data, I have to act and create data and then analyze. So when there is a disaster, we don't have data. When there is a crisis, we may not have data. So we have to very quickly act, create data, and then analyze the data. Okay? So the way we humans go into the future is analysis before action or action before analysis. When you have data, you analyze and act. When you don't have data, you act and then analyze. Okay, so start small, scale slow, and the market will tell you which direction you need to go. So, Jay, are you saying to all of us, there is no one size fits all solution? Absolutely. Okay. It is product by product, market by market. All competition is hyper local. Where large companies make mistakes is they try to find one formula for all markets. And that is where small companies, local companies can take advantage. Okay? Because you know the local taste much better than anybody else. Okay? So the word strategy comes from the Greek word strategos. What does the word strategos mean? Strategos means leading into a battlefield. Okay? How does the general lead into the battlefield? Okay? At times you send the cavalry, people on the horses. At times you send the infantry, people on the foot. At times you send the cavalry, the people on the camels. You win the war battlefield by battlefield. So for each battlefield, it's a different game. Okay? So that's why Louis is saying it's battlefield by battlefield. So you win the war battlefield by battlefield. Okay? There are times where formulas work. For example, franchising. Franchising is a wonderful growth mechanism. One of the first things you should be thinking is franchising. Okay? Once you make a model work, how can you scale? All right. Any other? Have I addressed most of the questions? Angel, anything? Ramon? Okay.
I think you addressed it.
Okay. Yeah, please let me know if I haven't addressed any questions. Okay.
Jay, there was a message that was private chatting to me.
Yeah.
I've just posted.
Yes. Okay. Government, the role of government. Absolutely. The government is very, very important to make sure that you have the space in which you are able to innovate. Okay. So Babson works with lots of governments globally. And especially to work with ecosystems, to start up ecosystems. Okay. So governments, large companies, some of the best scale-up entrepreneurs come from large companies. Okay? There are startup entrepreneurs and there are scale-up entrepreneurs. 99% of all companies in Puerto Rico have less than 10 people. Okay? So most companies don't scale up. Okay? So you create jobs only when you scale up. So we know that scale-up entrepreneurship is slightly different from startup entrepreneurship. Who are the best scale-up entrepreneurs? The best scale-up entrepreneurs are the ones who have experience working in large companies. These are people who are done sourcing from China. They know how to build a distribution center in Uruguay. They know how to manage a call center in India. They know how to scale up. So bringing in scale-up skills are incredibly important. So the government, the universities, and the large companies, when you bring them all together, creates a better entrepreneurial ecosystem for scale-ups. Okay? So don't think only about startups. Think in terms of scale-ups. Okay? Electric car, what happened to it? Government didn't allow it. Here is a movie titled, Who Killed the Electric Car? At the turn of the last century, there were more electric cars on the streets of New York than we have today. Okay? But then technology changes. The internal combustion engine performance became so much better. And the cost of gasoline became so much cheaper. Okay? That's why investments didn't go in there. But 100 years later, we are seeing the impact of that decision that was made by humanity, not just individuals. Okay? And so, yes, we make mistakes. And at times, governments make mistakes. And I have been following nuclear power for the last 20 years. And we do make mistakes. And when the German government made a mistake because of Fukushima, it's very hard to recover from that. Okay? Even though we know it is one of the cleanest forms and it is incredibly safe. Just because Fukushima blew up doesn't mean the rest of them are not. The rest of them are also problematic. Okay, absolutely. Educating the government should be one of the first goals for every community. Bring the government in, educate the government, because the way technology develops, they have to understand that. All right, Michael. Yes. Yes, it's execution, not just, yes, absolutely. Great strategy on paper doesn't mean great execution. Venture capitalists are very clear on that. Okay? Venture capitalists always have a rule of thumb. They say it's better to invest in A team and a B idea rather than an A idea and a B team. What do they mean by that? Okay. An A team never falls in love with their idea. Okay. It's not about the idea. It's about that execution, ability to change. And it's the ability to act. Now, there are three components to all businesses. Who and why, who's the customer segment, what is their pain? The second is what? What's the product? What's the technology? And then the how, the business model. Who and why, who, where, why, what, how. Three components, always. Who, what, how. Okay? Now, most humans, we make mistakes. We make mistakes because we prematurely fall in love with the technology or we fall in love with the business model without understanding the who, where, and why. So we make systematic mistakes in our planning and our strategy. And so what happens is that when you act, usually the market will tell you that is BS. Is that clear? Okay. That's why that acting is so important. There is only one filter, and that's the market. It is not professors, it's not incubators, it's not accelerators, it is not venture capitalists. Even venture capitalists make a lot of mistakes. Their hit rate is pretty good compared to most others because they do it so often. Okay? But the most mistakes we make is usually on paper, not when we are acting. So that's why that action is so important. In fact, when you go to Silicon Valley, they're obsessed with trying to get your prototype out, your minimum viable product out in the market as quickly as possible, that the market will tell you whether you're going in the right direction or not. Because you should be ready to change the market segment if it doesn't work. You should be able to change the product if it doesn't work, or you may have to change your business model if that doesn't work. Okay? So that's why that action becomes so important. Because most of us, we are not ready to change any of these three. And that's when we go bankrupt. Because we get wedded to our ideas. Miranda, qué bueno. Good to see you again. Qué pena, no recuerdo.
Jay, I have one more that was said to me in private chat. I'm posting.
Looking for the gap unmet market seems to point to my people on the ground closer. Absolutely. Please listen to your salespeople, listen to your marketing people. You personally go listen to them as well, because at times things get lost in translation. Okay? Because we humans are highly biased. Okay? One of the first things that we should learn how to do is how to make sure we listen and observe without bias. And unfortunately, we all listen, we all observe customers, but usually it's highly biased. Our biases come from our past success. Okay? In a crisis, you need to throw away those biases. and observe and listen to customers without bias. Good news is we can learn how to listen to without prejudgment and without prejudice. Okay, we can do that. And so how can we go listen to the unmet needs without judgment? So that's hard, but we can do it. Rachel, how are we doing on time? We have 3 minutes more. If Cameron, we will leave it to you as to how when you want to pull the plug. Okay.
Sure. I think I'd like to open for one last question. If anybody wants to speak up. I think everybody has asked you everything for now. I do want everybody to remember that if you become part of the chamber, you get access to significant discounts, more educational opportunities at Babson. I do want to mention, as you have here on your screen, there are a few short courses that are coming up soon, and you also have the entrepreneurial boot camp in Babson that's actually going to be in May. So I would highly recommend you guys, if you are interested in learning more and further develop your entrepreneurial skills, to be able to join the chamber, get those discounts from Babson, and actually continue to become either a more successful entrepreneur or a first-time entrepreneur with the right educational tool and skill set. So once again, Jay and the Babson team, thank you so much for your time today. For everybody who attended to this event, thank you so much. It's truly a pleasure to have all you guys here, and hopefully until next time.